Good afternoon. Welcome to this week's episode of Safety Culture Solutions, brought to you by Safety Culture Strategies. I'm Mike Kinney, your host, and throughout the episodes, we have a lot of learned individuals, much smarter than I, that have been on the show with us, sharing their thoughts on strategies and approaches and differences that can truly enhance your safety culture journey. I use the phrase journey a lot because this is an ongoing process. I'm not sure if anybody ever truly gets there. If you think you figured it out, let me know. And we are thrilled to have with us today Mr. Wyatt Bradbury, CSP, CHST, CIT. He serves as SHE advisor to Hitachi Rail, which is a very large organization, and an adjunct professor at the University of Alabama Birmingham. He has experience in aquatic and recreation risk management, electrical construction, powerline safety, rail safety, and safety consulting. He holds a master's in engineering and advanced safety engineering and management from the University of Alabama Birmingham. He also serves on the drafting committee of ANSI Z490.1 OSH training standard and Z590.6 technical report, guidance for the sizing, fit, selection, and use of personal protective equipment apparel marketed to women. Wyatt is a professional member and past president of the national chapter of ASSP, American Society of Safety Professionals, a member of the Society's Emerging Professionals and OSH Common Interest Group, and member of the Training and Communications Practice Specialty. Good morning, sir, and welcome aboard. It is great to have you with us.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm privileged to be here with you, Mike.
You bet. So you're kind of on the East Coast here in Nevada. Just to give you an update, we're no longer 120, trying to get 130. So we're kind of getting more towards the fall. We got to keep this a little bit evergreen. And you've mentioned, we chatted before. Mary and I used to live in the Maryland area, up in Gaithersburg actually, and we always enjoyed the fall. Then in the spring, you had the cherry blossoms in bloom, if I recall.
Yep. So we're waiting for. Everyone's seeding their grass now, and we're waiting for the leaves to turn here. So we're excited.
Oh, yeah.
Fall's a great time of year.
Yeah, I think, and you had to see a whole bunch of those different colors come out with the trees is absolutely amazing. Well, going through your bio, and I've done a little bit of checking on you. You've been at this dance a lot. You got a lot of diversity, and what fascinates me with you being serving in this adjunct professor role, I think you've kind of had to decode that magic ring, for lack of a better phrase, on how to communicate some of these thoughts to others to help them grow, especially in the classroom. Is that pretty accurate portrayal?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do a lot of. Safety culture is such a big topic that people have. Everyone wants to know what a safety culture is. How do we build it? What is it? And so we actually throughout the program, we really dissect and really deconstruct safety culture, as we like to look at it as safety professionals, and kind of look at it as what is culture as a baseline, and what is organizational culture, and really how does safety fit into that, as opposed to safety culture being this separate thing? How does it integrated into the rest of the business?
That's a great strategy, and I've talked to some of my guests previously. Every company has a culture by definition. And everybody goes, well, why do you talk about safety culture? And I says, well, because you're right. It all fits under the same umbrella. But what I've learned over the years with the challenge of, if you cannot keep your eye on your safety culture, that can very quickly be impacting your bottom line, your ability to get insurance, attrition, profit share, positions in social media if you're hurting people. But you're right. It's kind of a reflection of your overall culture, I think, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah, absolutely.
So from your perspective, we kind of cue this up now, and he goes, uh-oh, where's Mikey going? So what do you see as like one key attribute if you walked into a warehouse or a company and you're going to go in to discuss some of the great courses you offer at the university, just what's a good attribute you would key on to say, they're kind of on the right path with their safety culture?
Yeah, so for me, there's kind of three things that I look at.
Okay.
The first is engagement across the organization. So how often is safety being brought outside of the safety function? How often are those people talking about safety, involved in safety? One of the great examples is we at Hitachi Rail have a team that's working right now on a project for the organization. And every single meeting starts off with a safety moment. And not once has the safety function actually been asked, to provide that safety moment. These are other employees involved in the project that are bringing these together and putting them forth and discussing them, and HSC's not even leading that conversation. So engagement across the organization. Another one is frontline and middle leadership need to be the owners of HSC. If everything's getting pushed on to your health and safety function, pushed on to that safety leader, and that's their role, that's their job, they're going to handle that, you're never going to get anywhere. We need those frontline and middle leadership folks, however it works within your organization, to be the ones that step up and have that ownership. And then we need support from that top leadership across the spectrum of resources. So it's really easy to say, hey, yeah, I support you, you're doing a great job, but we've got to make sure that they've got, whether it's financial, whether it's time, whether it's engagement, whether it's FaceTime with those senior leaders or FaceTime with frontline employees, whatever it is, there's that full support across the spectrum of resources for our health and safety.
And that's so powerful, especially that first one. I know years ago I was in Ohio, I believe, and they were loading ore cars. And so they'd have their safety meeting, the plan of the day around 6 a.m. or 0600. And their topic that morning was 20, 30 people standing there kind of ready to go to work. It was use of ladder safety, especially use of step ladders, because they used a lot of them. And it was so refreshing, because I went in as an observer, that people leading the discussion were the craft, not the safety person. So to me, you're right on target. Now it's actually starting to get inculcated in the organization. Conversely, I've been with organizations and they come take a look, and they would have their monthly safety meeting. And when someone got injured, they would turn to their safety manager and say, what are you going to do about it? And I went, ooh, I think maybe there's an opportunity here to help them appreciate what this is. And you were the key on it, is having that ownership kind of across the board. So as for leaders, I think, you talk about top leadership. What do you think some critical skills for them to help? Because I've yet to meet a leader, and you're probably the same situation, that doesn't want to make a difference, and they want to make sure everybody's safe, and they're excited to show the enthusiasm. What some critical skills can help them with that goal?
Yeah, so this is going to hopefully be a new one or a big one for you, Mike, but cool. This idea of sense making. And sense making is defined by Carl Wyatt as how we structure the unknown so that we're able to act in it. And I think it's critical that business leaders understand that their organizations are complex systems. When you look at the definition of a complex system, they're inherently unpredictable. They're inherently have a disconnect between inputs and outputs. You can't control these systems, so they're uncontrollable. You can't necessarily have, again, that predictability to say, this is what I want and this is exactly how we're going to get it. And it requires constant learning. It requires constant updates, running estimates. It requires updates to the plans. It requires creativity and empowerment of individuals. And so all of these things kind of tie back to this idea of sense making. And to me, really through my master's research and now what we do at UAB, some of the things we're teaching at UAB, it really, to me, this is kind of a linchpin term that if we started to bring sense making into our organizations, I think we would really influence the approach that leadership takes. And I really think that we would start to see a difference in the cultural output and in the output really overall of the organization.
Okay, so you got my interest for sure. So what would be a layman's definition, like beat up safety guy like me, for sense making? I'm really intrigued. So how do you kind of capture that in a brief definition?
Yeah, so the way that I would look at it, I almost look at how do you bring the scientific method to your organization. If you're familiar from going back to your organization or your elementary and junior high science classes, this idea of the scientific method, right? So the scientific method, you have a problem. So you identify your problem, and from there you put out your hypothesis. You say, okay, this is what I think. And then you run an experiment to determine how close are you between what you think and what might the results actually be. And then you get your conclusions and results. And then based on those conclusions and results, you might say, okay, well, we need to update the way that we think about things currently. We need to reframe the way that we're thinking about these things currently. Or, hey, we're way off base. We need to start to really look at this. Or, hey, we are spot on. Let's look at it again. With the whole idea being the fact that we're constantly learning, because in science, they never stop, right? They'll even run the same experiment over and over and over again, different conditions, trying to get the same result or trying to see how the results start to differ. And so there's the folks who are big into sense making, Ivan Puglitti and some of those other thought leaders in this area, well, they cringe when I boil it down to this level. But to me, this is the best way that I can explain it to someone and get them to think about it a little bit differently and think about how it could impact their organization. Because again, there's always challenges that our employees are being faced with. And if they look at each challenge almost as an experiment, right? So we're able to kind of, okay, I don't know how to solve this, right? I've got a problem. I've got to find the solution. I can't go back to, my frontline manager or top management every single time,
Correct.
right? I'm going to have to figure this one out. Think of it as an experiment and an opportunity to stop and think, plan an action, think about what the result might be, right? So you're almost doing a little mini management of change there as you're adapting.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And then you're enacting that action. But again, you're now invested in that outcome. You want to know that if that outcome's going to work or not, and that might be something you can then take back to your team. So that's kind of a way to maybe break it down for layman's, and really something that could be implemented across the board.
That's an innovative approach. It's almost like a mini PSM, right? Especially for the MOC, the management of change that you see in the OSHA for 1910-119. So I got to ask, what kind of led you to all this? Because you're obviously very well credentialed. You really enjoy what you're doing. You have a lot of passion in it. How'd you kind of get here?
So I'd like to say I fell into safety. I was working in college. I was working in the aquatics department, and I had been a swim coach forever, teaching swim lessons, things like that. And I'd been a lifeguard for years, and I finally had the opportunity to become a lifeguard instructor. And so then I started training the lifeguard staff at the University of Maryland. We started doing community classes. I started providing a lot of CPR first aid to community classes, and really different folks throughout the UMD community. And from there, I said, hey, I kind of like this training thing. I really enjoy this. And I found a company, a local construction company not far. I could take the bus from school to the company's office, and they needed a safety administrator. And I kind of said, hey, I'm going to try this out. I can do administrative work. It's not going to hurt me. And I loved it. I mean, I was instantly getting involved in workers' compensation, getting involved in training, orientations, onboardings. I mean, it was a great way to launch my career. Chad Biddick did a great job training his team and supporting his team to really be future safety leaders.
And it's interesting just that what you flowed in there for, because we get a lot of viewers throughout in the C-suite level down to young practitioners, especially some of the younger practitioners out there. Kind of, I'm sure you picked up on what Wyatt just shared. He kind of started out, and you were kind of like on that lower rung of some of the top work you were doing, but you realized, this is kind of interesting, and it's obviously made some big changes in your career because you were willing to take on some of those kind of lower on the rungs, if you will, for the professional ladder to kind of get you going.
Yeah, I learned a ton. And frankly, I mean, I think it helped make me really well-rounded.
Yeah.
Because there's not much that I haven't done or haven't seen or been exposed to maybe within the whole of OH&S, EH&S.
And as I understand with the Hitachi Rail, they're kind of big time with signal communications, et cetera, for the railroad industry. Is that a kind of way to summarize it?
Yeah, we're a global organization. We do turnkey rail solutions. In the U.S., we've got big projects in Baltimore, a big project in San Francisco, up in Boston. We're doing a bunch of work. We've got a huge project up in Toronto, down in Panama and Peru, Lima, Peru. So we've got big projects all over the place, constantly getting more work. And, that's a great learning experience because,
Yes.
I think there's the rail industry when it comes to safety. It's a little bit of a niche industry.
True.
But something I like to think of is, for a lot of these niche industries, utilities would be another one.
Yes.
The principles are the same.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
The principles are the same across the board. So how can we start to some of these very, I'll say, old school industries, very niche industries? How can we start to bring some of these best practices that we found from across the board in and help them grow and develop? Because technology is always changing.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, the trains are still running on two rails, but the way that they're running on those two rails is completely different now. And I can't, don't ask me about the technology. I'll get lost, but it's way different nowadays, more and more automated, which is great from a safety perspective.
Absolutely. So we're going to take a short break. We're going to be right back. We're going to learn a whole bunch more what's going on with Wyatt, Bradbury, Mitsubishi, lots of stuff coming up in universities. Yeah, we got a good free range thinker on the show. Stand by. Don't go away.
Safety Culture Strategies provides world-class safety culture and safety program management consultative services for clients throughout the United States. Whether your company is pursuing Voluntary Protection Program STAR designation, ISO 45001 certification, or considering a comprehensive review of your current safety programs and processes, Safety Culture Strategies brings hands-on experience combined with a unique perspective that readily translates from senior management to task-level personnel. This collective skill set provides you with a very insightful health check of your overall safety management system that can also assist with reducing injuries and attrition, as well as increasing profitability. Safety Culture Strategies is also certified to provide Ziegler Institute employee engagement training and leadership coaching. When combined with established relationships with federal and state regulators, Safety Culture Strategies is uniquely positioned to assist the safety culture efforts of any company. For additional information, visit www.scstrat.com or call us at 702-780-1410. After all, every company has a safety culture, but is it the culture you want?
As we're learning, talking to Wyatt Bradbury today, in essence, it's your culture. But safety culture or safety is part of your culture. It's very, very critical. So I gotta ask. I think this is gonna be a fun response from your perspective and time in the field, and being around the rail industries, all these other organizations. Is it possible to actually measure the difference when you have a really effective safety culture, or is it more just kind of organic in nature?
Well, I think I'm going to have a fun response to this one. I'm really hesitant when we say we're going to measure anything, right? Because the conditions of that measurement, the way that we're capturing that metric, right? Especially as we're looking at something that's culture. So it's not like a hard number. Now we're starting to get into perceptions and, psychological safety. Do we even have that in an organization present to know and be able to trust the value that we're getting? And so to me, saying that we're going to measure something really makes my spiny senses kind of start to tingle. To me, the metrics that we're taking, they're not measurements. They really should be indicators. And I really pull that from Paul Esposito, who's been a good mentor and friend of mine, really using those as indicators. So to me, I think unless we know that we have psychological safety in our organization, some of these more, I'm going to call them touchy-feely impressions we might have, I think we just got to understand that it's going to be organic. I'd be really careful with that metric unless we know that we have those conditions in place. I think the other thing is that, in complex organizations, there's not a linearity between input and output.
Good point.
And so trying to say that, hey, I'm gonna make these small alterations, or I'm gonna ask this question and expect this result, or be able to take the result, especially that's something that's really personal, and make it very binary.
Yeah.
I think we need to be careful with that as a measurement. I think we're oversimplifying a very complicated thing.
Well, and I'm totally in the same page on this, Wyatt. And one of the companies I've assisted, and I helped them do a safety culture assessment. And so we identified stressors and recommendations, the list goes on. And they said, well, we're going to redo it again in 6 months. I said, well, hold on here. Because I said, you're probably going to have some corrective actions. You're probably going to revise some procedures. So now you want to issue them, orientate, train, we're going to call people to this new approach. And you got to give them soak time. Because to me, if you go back in 6 months, maybe if you're lucky, if you've got all the training done and you go, well, we really didn't make any difference. Well, but they were so enthused and excited. Well, I said, part of that, you got to kind of balance, because I used the analogy on the show previously. It's kind of like turning a cruise ship, right? You got to put a lot of pressure on the rudder for an extended period of time, consistently, and then slowly the bow starts to turn the way you want. So I think you're on target.
Yep.
And a lot of people that I know, they're going to go, ooh, because they know they can measure it. I think you're measuring more, I think, just some given metrics on indicators, or how many health and safety inspections are being done. Okay, that's something you might look at, but to say it helps reflect your health, I'm not sure if it's going to really get you there.
No, I agree with you there, Mike. And I like that cruise ship analogy. That's a good one. That's actually a really good one.
Because people go, ooh. And the other one I've used I stole it from one of my other buddies. We were in a big meeting, and the client was a little bit persnickety, didn't take too much. And they were kind of that just, shoot, aim, fire, techniques. They had a little bit out of order. And so we're talking about a challenge, and they were poised, ready to go to act that day. And then he looked at me and says, sir, I offer your consideration. This is a rheostat, not a toggle switch. And it resonated, and I've used it. And I like that one too, because it's like incremental change over a period of time, not just an on and off. And they go, oh.
Yep.
So here's a fun one. So in your career, you've had a lot of different boots on the ground at different organizations. Who are one or two or three different people that have really made a difference for your career path and candidly helps you in trajectory to where you're at now?
Yeah, that's a good question. And there's probably more people than I could name in this podcast. I could probably spend the 30 minutes talking about the impacts that people have had. But I'm going to go back to the earliest one. One of my first mentors was a gentleman named Jerry Rivera. And he really taught me and instilled in me this idea of owning my development. But it didn't end there. He was someone who came in and said, I'm going to help you grow from there as well. And he opened some doors for me. He's the one that really got me, pushed me towards the University of Alabama Birmingham. I probably never would have found that university had it not been for him. He's an alumni of the program as well. He's one of the first cohorts. But really this idea of owning your development and knowing, especially as a young safety and health professional, you're waiting for your boss to say, hey, you're going to take these trainings. Here's your budget. Here's this and that. And it never comes, right? And so if you're there and you're going out and you're pursuing and you're looking for those opportunities and you're making your growth, your development, your career kind of happen, I think that's something key that was instilled in me early on. It's something that I try to help other professionals with, whether they be students, whether they be other young professionals, other mid-career professionals. How can I help you kind of own your own development, and where can I sponsor and support you along the way?
Excellent. Another thought with you being in this professor role with the attendees in some of your classes, what changes have you seen in the last few years? Are they more intrigued with some of the processes of safety? Is it more of a checking a box, a class they got to take? Just what's the overall tone with some of the participants?
Yeah, so we're a master's program.
Cool.
And we're a Master of Engineering in Advanced Safety Engineering and Management.
Nice.
So all of our courses are safety and health related. We have some ethics courses. We've got some courses that are more technical. So we've got a biomechanics, biomedical engineering class that really looks at accident reconstructions. So very detailed, really looking in at what is kind of the methodology of an accident, especially with car crashes. What are kind of the engineering impacts and the physics impacts of that? We have a great safety management systems class. We've got a great class that really dives into the Erickson design process as it relates to your PHLs, PHAs, SHAs. And we've got some other classes with some other faculty like Ivan Pupoliti, Krista Vessel, that are really focused on language and how does language impact safety. We've got some certainly a course that I teach on ethics. We've got a course on learning through undesirable incidents. So like I say an accident investigation class because that's what folks will relate to, but it's really focused on learning through incidents and learning through undesirable outcomes using the U.S. Forest Service learning review process. So we've got a wide gamut. And I will say the most fun part is kind of the person like me. And I came into the program very black and white, very much safety is compliance. You must follow the rules. I can't believe you won't just wear your PPE. What's wrong with you?
What's wrong with you?
You're adults. Yeah, right. That was my mindset early on. And through the program, you kind of learn human factors, human and organizational performance. You learn some of the new approaches to safety. And it's just fun. having seen myself in my own journey as I went through the program, seeing those students coming in and they've got kind of that same approach, and then just seeing their growth. Even, we're 6 weeks into our semester now, and even talking to some of the students, they're like, wow, I cannot believe I cannot believe the approach that I take, the impact it had, and the opportunities that are before me.
Wow, that's rewarding. Years ago, I was at a series of construction sites in Southwest United States, and the local safety guy came out of the military, very talented, and he carried a copy of OSHA 1926 in his hip pocket. And so he would go look at something, then fan open the book, and so he could cite it appropriately. So finally I told him, I said, okay, Haas, let's go to lunch together. I told him, the first thing I says, can you put away the OSHA book? I says, you want to get to know these people as a person. Have some conversation, because to me, they truly understand the hazards associated with work, and do they have the right controls in place? And if you keep sounding like an OSHA guy, and literally I went back a month later, and he goes, oh my, it was totally different. He says, before they would barely talk to me. So it was just, so it's refreshing to hear that coming out of the efforts of your university. So we're getting towards the end of this show. I knew this one was going to go quick, Wyatt, because I got to bring you back, because you've piqued my interest in so many areas, and we can't get to all of them in 30 minutes. So you've been speaking maybe at the university, or they flew you somewhere else in the world, and they're chanting your name. They have banners. They're asking for your autograph. They want to invite you to dinner. And so as you're getting ready to leave the stage, what's 2 or 3 things you really hope that the attendees write down and take back to their companies?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's how are you developing your people? So continual development, continual learning is critical, especially as we want to implement this idea of sense making, which is really continual experimentation in support of continual learning. How are you supporting your people? So this is an idea of how are you making sure that they have what they need in order to be successful? And how are you empowering your people? How are you helping make sure that they have the authority at the local level to go out and to really own the organization, really kind of looking at that theory Y approach to management and leadership? How are you making sure that they have the ability to achieve their goals and the organizational goals? And I think it's important, developing, supporting, empowering, there's a nuance between all of them that I think is really important that we kind of explore. So this idea of supporting is breaking down those resource barriers, working through those resource conflicts. Empowering is really making sure that they're the ones taking ownership of the organization.
And probably somewhere in those 3 is that kind of that overarching, maybe underlying element of trust, right?
Oh, trust. I wanted to work trust a couple different ways in here into our conversation today. And I think it is kind of an underlying piece of the conversation. So I appreciate you calling that out. That's another great term to use.
Because the organizations say, well, what's that look like? And I says, well, you'll probably see it if you don't have it. Would be, they're rolling their eyes in their meetings, their arms are crossed, they're kind of ignoring you. And then you ask for suggestions in the suggestion box, and it's full of cobwebs because people aren't engaged, because maybe either they haven't had feedback, or the way it came across, or some decisions that were made that weren't communicated effectively. They probably don't trust the C-suite. Yes, sir.
I'll say one of the most damaging things you can do in your organization is to bring people in and not trust them to execute the job you've hired them to do. Ooh. And your people are going to pick up on that really quickly, and they're going to know, and there's no incentive then for them to stay.
So when you say, okay, now you got mentors, so you bring somebody in an organization, you don't trust them to do the work they were hired to do, in essence. So what would be some examples of that leadership team or the mid-management not trusting them?
Well, I think one is if you're constantly micromanaging them,
there you go.
If you're more focused on butt and seat time than you are in the actual work output. Kind of all the things we're struggling with through COVID, right? We're so used to managers seeing their people at work and saying, because they're at work, they must be working. Whereas, we've seen that for a lot of folks, their ability to work in the ways, means, methods that really support them, and to be more focused on the outcomes or the output than the time. I think to me that's one of the easy examples, and certainly we could spend another half hour really digging into that.
You're right on target. And I've shared with some of my clients as this COVID, and then the way we've had to do the remote, work, et cetera, and Zooms. I said, one thing is I've kind of picked up on, hopefully don't sound too harsh, leaders that weren't very effective, it became glaringly apparent how ineffective they are.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, how can people get a hold of them? I'm sure they want to learn more about the amazing programs here at university.
Yeah, so we are, you can search UAB ASEM into Google. I know that's a terrible thing to say, but that's a great way to find our program on Google. Bradbury@uab.edu.
Okay.
That's my UAB email address. Feel free to reach me on there. Or always the easiest is probably just LinkedIn. You can find me, Wyatt Bradbury, on LinkedIn. Connect with me, shoot me a message, and I look forward to connecting more offline with folks there.
Excellent. Well, Wyatt, thank you so much for being on the show today, and enjoy your safety journey. And sooner, Ed, I got to come in and sit in the back of one of your classes to take some note, man. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike.
You have a great weekend, sir. And ladies and gentlemen, that includes this week's episode of Safety Culture Solutions, brought to you by Safety Culture Strategies. And everybody goes, Mike, how can we get a hold of you? Well, you know the drill by now. Hopefully, you can go to my website, www.scstrat.com. You can send me an email, mike@scstrat.com. I got to keep it simple, at least for me. Or call me at the office, 702-780-1410. Until next time, enjoy your safety culture journey. It's never truly done, but when you have trust in place, it makes everything else that much easier. Bye-bye for now.